Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom's back and welcome back to the episode of Top Drives. Now, update 21, also known as European New Wave, is around the corner, and if there are no more delays, it should be coming out, slated, at least according to Hajj Dimitri, next week. Well, this week, I guess. I'm already recording this on a Sunday. Oh, well, actually a Monday. Now it's like 1 a.m. But you get what I mean. If there are no more delays, we should be expecting the update very, very soon. And before that comes live, it is always like, I guess, tradition on the channel for us to take off our rose-tinted glasses and see if the brand new cars that are being teased are as good as Hajj tries to make it seem. Now, one of the funniest things that I've seen on their Facebook page was, I think Hajj slated this as like one of their most exciting updates ever. They're adding like 200 Skodas. That is apparently more exciting than World Expo, which added a bunch of Porsches and Mercedes and Hennessy. Okay, man, funny. But anyway, update 21. Let's see if the cars are worth the hype. I have 9 cars loaded up for you today. If I have enough time, if the update doesn't come out too soon, I might make a part 2. So let us begin, shall we? We're going to begin with the Citron C3 Max. I think based off on-paper stats, some people may think that this is a heavy hitter because it is an Ultra with 92 handling. But I'm not going to let this car fool me again. I remember doing Amalfi Curls when they released the teaser for the Alfa Romeo Giulietta TCR over here. Everyone was losing their minds that we were getting an Ultra with over 101 handling. The thing is though, I like to say that handling is key, and handling is everything, and that usually is the case on super twisty track sets, off-road track sets, and especially in the wet. But now that pendulum, whatever it is starting to swing away from the handling favor for performance and slick tire cars. What I mean is this: the Giulietta TCR, although it has 101 handling, doesn't have the stats to back it up to be that formidable car everyone thought it was going to be. It was actually relatively heavy, and it had a really weak 0 to 60, making it a weaker car to the Lotus Exige S1, the 340R, the Peugeot 306, and the Xenos E10. So you kind of need to look for that sweet spot, which is what the 340, the Xenos, and the Peugeot provide, which combines high handling and a very low 0 to 60. So I'm not going to let the Citron C3 kind of fool me. It has a pretty weak 0 to 60 at 5.4 seconds, pretty slow for an RQ62, and it's relatively heavy. It's not like, you know, incredibly heavy. It's definitely light compared to saloons and of course SUVs, but if you're comparing it to what are its, you know, main competitors, in my opinion, which are twisty specialists, it's just heavy. Like the Peugeot, the Lotus, the Xenos, they're all weighing under a ton. They're like 800, 900 kilograms, where the Citron C3, I believe, if it follows its real world stats, it should be a little over 1,000, like 1,100 to 1,200. Now, what you're gonna see color coded for this entire series is that green is what I believe the car will beat, yellow will be a pretty 50-50 chance, and red are what I think the car in question, the brand new car in question, will not be able to beat. So for an RQ62, I think that yes, it will beat the Giulietta TCR because of that 0 to 60 difference. They're very similar cars, but the Citron seems to be a little bit better. I think it will beat the Exige S1 by very slight margins. It will trade blows with the Abarth. I think it will win in most twisty scenarios against the Abarth, but when it comes to more hybrid and drag situations, then the Fiat 030 is going to win. And I don't just mean drags, I mean things like the fast circuit, maybe even the hairpin, because it's a very big 0 to 60 difference, but then again, also a very big handling difference. What I am pretty confident in saying though is that the Citron C3 Max is most likely going to lose to the Lotus 340R and is definitely going to lose to the Xenos E10 and the Peugeot 306. Not the worst thing in the world. Those two cars are RQ64 after all, so you would expect it to beat the Citron C3 everywhere. But what I'm trying to say is I don't think the Citron C3 is really worth the hype. It's 92 handling, yes, I get it, but that 0 to 60 is definitely going to weigh it down. Now, the next car that I want to talk about is the Bizini 5000 GT. It's a pretty interesting one because at first sight, you think it's low ground clearance, but when you compare it to low ground clearance RQ43s like the Countach, the RX-7, and the BRZ, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, the stats on the Bizini doesn't look like it has low ground clearance stats for an RQ43. The 0 to 60 is just way too slow, or the handling is just way too weak. For example, the Subaru BRZ has the same 0 to 60 as the Bizini at 6.4, but the handling difference is night and day, 78 to 85. So let's compare it to a low ground clearance car that has the same handling of the Countach. They both have 78, but the 0 to 60 is massively different from 5.9 to 6.4. Not to mention that the Countach actually is a relatively weak 0 to 60 for an RQ43, and it's kind of like it's made up for it in RQ because it has a higher top speed and better MRI. So I'm going to assume that the Bizini is medium ground clearance, which is a very interesting assumption, but I think it just has to be looking at the stats. So if it is medium ground clearance, I think that it kind of fits in between the BMW 330i and the Di Tommaso Pantera. In fact, it actually looks better than the Di Tommaso Pantera if they are both medium ground clearance, 6.6 to 6.4, 78 to 78. However, I don't think that it will be better than the Maserati Quattroporte diesel, which just has a lower 0 to 60 with the same handling. So it'll be a pretty interesting one to see where the Bizini kind of ends up within its competition. But as you can see, if it's only comparing and competing with the BMW and the Di Tommaso Pantera L, it's not going to be that impressive. Moving on to the third car that I want to talk about is the Volvo 850 T5R. I think it's going to be sitting in between the Maserati Quattroporte diesel as well as the Alfa Romeo 156 GTA. I don't think it will be better than the Mitsubishi Magna, although it may be close because the 850 is the best handling car within this very niche comparison, but that 0 to 60 of 0.2 seconds might give a very slight edge to the Magna, even though it has one handling less. The Volvo, I think, kind of sits in between the Alfa and the Quattroporte, mainly because the 0 to 60 isn't very strong. That being said, it handles better than both the cars. I think it'll be pretty interesting. I compared the Alfa and the Maserati Quattroporte, and even though that the Quattroporte, I know I'm saying Quattroporte very weird, but I like to say it rolls off the tongue very nicely. But even though it has better on-paper stats, I compared these two cars together on TDR, and the Alfa Romeo 156 was actually the way better car. So I would assume that if the Volvo 850 has similar performance to the 156, it should be able in beating the Quattroporte. Okay, but it'll be pretty interesting to see how it compares against the Alfa 156. Moving on to the next car that we want to talk about is going to be the Skoda Kodiak. Now, this does not look good. For an RQ68, it has a very weak 0 to 60 of 6.2 seconds, and the handling just isn't good enough. As you can see, it loses to most cars within its RQ, namely the Infiniti FX45, the Ford Edge, and the BMW X5. Now, we don't know what the MRI on the Kodiak is going to be. I don't think we can say for certain that it's going to be strong, but based on paper stats, it's already losing the battle against its RQ68 compatriots. The Infiniti FX has slightly better handling, even though they're the same 0 to 60. The Ford Edge, although they're the same handling, has a way better 0 to 60, and the BMW X5, although has worse handling, it has a 1.2 second difference in 0 to 60, and that is within the same RQ of 68. Another thing to take into consideration is that the Skoda Kodiak has the same exact stats, or actually slightly worse stats compared to the GMC Acadia. The Acadia, by the way, which has a 56% user keep score on Top Drives Club, so not good, actually has better on-paper stats than the Kodiak. I mean, yeah, lower top speed, but we don't really care about that when it comes to the off-road meta. It's not like you're going to be using any of these cars in a drag situation anyway. So, you know, the GMC's Acadia 6.1 to 76 compared to the Kodiak 6.2 76 is something to take note about. At least on an on-paper level, doesn't look very good. The Kodiak will be able to beat the BMW X2 and the Volvo EX90, at least on paper stats wise. Now, one thing to consider though is that the EX90, 2 RQ less, very big 0 to 60 difference, 5.6 to 6.2, but at least the Skoda has 2 more handling, and it is slightly better than the BMW X2 with a slightly lower 0 to 60. But those aren't good cars to compare it against. The BMW X2 is terrible. The GMC Acadia, I mean, that's a 56% user score for crying out loud, so I don't think that Skoda is going to be any good, to be honest. And that's really the majority of European New Wave. It's just a bunch of all-surface tire cars that are not going to give you a lot of value. Next up is our legendary Zenvo ST1, and we don't know what the MRA on this car is going to be, and the MRA is going to be a massive factor. If it has similar MRA or slightly better MRA, or even the same MRA as the McLarens, then it actually is going to be one of the best 85s, because it has better on-paper stats compared to the McLarens. It has lower 0 to 60 compared to the 12C, and it handles better compared to the McLaren 570S. So that's a good start. I don't think it's going to be beating the Porsche 911 GT3 in any twisty kind of scenario, because the GT3 has 4 more handling, which is massive. But if the Zenvo can get the same MRA as those McLarens, it is safe to say that it's going to be better than those McLarens, also with that higher top speed. But if the Zenvo has a lower, like a significantly lower MRA compared to the McLarens, like we're saying like more than 6 or maybe even more than 5, the McLarens are probably going to be better cars. It's a very tight competition between those, so it'll be quite interesting to see what the MRI of the Zenvo ST1 is going to be. Moving on to the next car now is the Ford Focus ST. Now something's got to be wrong here, man. 5.885 in the 2022 model. You're telling me that the 2019 model Ford Focus ST is 0.4 seconds faster? There are 2 scenarios of how this can go. Either they buff the ST from 2022, or they're going to nerf the ST from 2019. So I don't know which way Hutch wants to play it, but I can see the latter happening. The Ford Focus ST might get a decrease in 0 to 60, which would be very, very sad. But for where it stands compared to how these cars perform in the game in the current day, and update 20, the Ford Focus ST will not be beating anything here. It looks, at least on paper, worse than the Ford Focus ST from World Expo, the Renault Megane, which handles significantly better with the same 0 to 60 and 1 lower in RQ, and of course it doesn't even beat the Cobalt SS, which there is a 0.3 second difference to 60 between both the cars. One thing about the Ford Focus ST though is that if all the RQs of these cars stay the same in the next update, then the Ford Focus ST will be the only medium ground clearance RQ57 front wheel drive with performance tires. But that will only be true if these cars over here do not change in RQ in the coming update. Moving on to the next one that we want to talk about is the Citron Saxo Super 1600. A pretty interesting one. I would say the direct rival to the Citron Saxo is going to be the Renault Sport Megane. Very, very close. 5.5 0 to 60s on both cars, and the Megane handles a little bit better. 87 to the Citron's 86. I think it's fair to say that the Renault Sport Megane is going to be the better car on hybrid and fast scenarios because of that higher top speed and probably slightly better MRA, but I think it's fair to say that the Citron Saxo Super is going to be way lighter, and I think in that scenario it might be able to beat the Renault Sport Megane on things like slalom and maybe even G-force. So those two are going to be very close. I believe that that the Citron is going to be better than the Nissan 370Z and the Nissan Micra, as well as the Alfa Romeo 147. I mean, no surprise over there. The Alfa is low in RQ, the Nissan's about the same, and the Nissan Micra is a pretty weak 52, and I think it's definitely going to lose to cars like the Mazda MX-5 Cup and the Lotus Elise Sport. I mean, for comparison, the MX-5 actually beats the Renault Sport in most places, so if we're going to use that logic that the Saxo is similar to the Megane, then it's probably going to lose to the MX-5 as well. Again, this is all based off assumptions. I will do another series when we actually have solid times when the cars are actually in the game. Moving on to the next thing that I want to talk about is going to be the Skoda Superb hatchback. One thing that's definitely wrong is the word superb. It looks way out of its element. RQ78, 5.5, 75, four-wheel drive and standard tires. I do apologize. I just realized that the way that I placed the image of this Skoda Superb is blocking out the drivetrain and the tire type. It's four-wheel drive, it's standard. 5.5, 75, and it loses to everything within its RQ and even lower in its RQ. I had to go all the way down to RQ75, 3 RQ difference in the Volvo S80. S80 to find a car that is on par with it, at least on paper stats, right? So the Volvo S80 is 5676, the Skoda Superb is 5575. If that thing is staying at 78, it's gonna have some pretty bonkers MRA to even get close to cars like, you know, the Lincoln MKZ. I mean, that's 4.8 to 5.5. They're both four-wheel drive, they're both medium, they're both standard tires, they both have 75 handling, and they both hit over 150 miles per hour when you put some upgrades into them. But yeah, that 2 to 60 difference of 0.7 is just absolutely massive. So the Superb hatchback has to have some MRA, which wouldn't make any sense because I wouldn't really expect a Skoda to have really good MRA, better MRA than like a Cadillac CT6, I would say, or even an Audi A5. So yes, based on paper stats, the Superb is lacking far behind many standard tire four-wheel drive medium ground clearance cars in the game. Now I am comparing it, you know, all to basically saloons. I think the Sportback isn't a saloon. I'm not too sure about that one, but the rest are saloons. I'm not sure if the Superb will be a saloon. It looks like a saloon, but literally hatchback is in the goddamn name. So that will be a pretty interesting one to see what it ends up. I don't know, man. Just based off my own eyesight, that looks like a saloon to me. It has a trunk. Anyway, moving on. I believe this is the last car that we're going to be talking about in today's video. It's a Radical SR1 XXR. Now, straight up, I think when we first saw this car, everybody said it was going to be a Viper SRT10 ACR killer. I think it will be. It has the same stats as the SRT10, and it's definitely going to be way lighter, which means it'll be the SRT10 in anything twisty. In the faster stuff, the SRT10 is still going to be a better car because it has 96 MRA and a higher top speed, but I wouldn't even compare the Radical in fast scenarios. I would say that it's more of a superlight kind of car, and I want to see how it would compare against the superlight. I would think that the superlight is still lighter. The superlight has a way lower 0 to 60 as well, 0.5 seconds separating both cars, but the Radical has 3 more handling, so a battle between those cars would be pretty interesting. But in terms of like super twisty scenarios, it's definitely going to be the best 81. Maybe with the Superlight, it will beat the Viper, which is sad. It will beat the Renault Megane, which is like 3 RQ or 2 RQ higher. But then again, people might say, oh, it's not fair that you're just comparing the Radical to the Viper and the Megane because, you know, those two cars are hybrids and, you know, the Radical would lose to both of those cars in a drag scenario. That's why the TVR Typhon is there. You know what I mean? Like, okay, the Vipers and the Meganes, now they're basically going to lose to the Radical in the twisty scenarios, and they're going to lose to the TVR in the fast scenario. So honestly, the addition of the Radical basically brings down the stock of the Viper and the Megane banana just a little bit more, without really damaging the reputation of the TVR Typhon, for example, or even the Bristol Firefighter, whatever it's called, the Bristol Fighter, not Firefighter. But yeah, I think this is the one that, you know, I wouldn't mind unpacking. Looks like a pretty decent car. I mean, if you get it to 1 star, it's already 96 handling, which is better than a lot of legendaries can get, which are higher in RQ. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today, guys. Those are 9 cars that I've decided to showcase for the coming update. I mean, honestly, most of them don't look like they're actually worth the hype. Radical, I would say yes, it's worth the hype, right? Skoda, not worth the hype. Citron, gray area. Ford Focus, not worth the hype. Zenvo, gray area. Skoda, not worth the hype. Volvo, gray area. Bizini, not worth the hype. And the Citron C3 Max, not worth the hype. So honestly, it doesn't look that good. But if I do a part 2, I might add some more cars like the Ford Ranger Raptor, for example, and that one overpowered Citron with 4-wheel drive and off-road tires. That one's definitely going to be amazing. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. Let me know down in the comments below what cars you want to see if I'll make a part 2. I'll only make a part 2 if the update doesn't come out in the next couple of days. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. You're going to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all